Beautiful day in San Francisco. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on how this presentation came together. A couple of years ago, I saw changes in leadership, particularly around women. And I wanted to go out and do some academic studies just to see what's the pulse today compared to what in the past. And with my team, we did two studies. One was a qualitative study and one was a quantitative study. In the quantitative study, we just sent out surveys to men and women in all kinds of organizations, leadership positions, startups, public companies, private companies, to try to understand how men and women viewed leadership themselves, each other, and tally up the numbers. At the same time, I did a qualitative study where I interviewed over 200 leaders to try to see what's going on in the mindset and see if the results come together. Well, it wasn't about women. That's what was interesting, is that not only did we have some interesting insights about women, but we had a lot more about generations and also about leadership and also about careers. So I built this presentation to give you some of the highlights, because I'm never going to make you read those academic studies because they get really tedious, but maybe bring to life with a couple of videos some of the findings that might be useful for you as aspiring leaders at Visa. So the first one, let me just explain this survey. When you go out and you ask people to take a survey, you look at the results. And interesting enough is women ranked women highest on all leadership attributes, characteristics, and skills of modern-day leaders. Across the board, all ages, women clearly said, we want women as leaders. So then you say, uh-oh, are the men going to say men rank men highest? Well, they didn't. And that's where the story began. Because we said if men don't rank men highest on all leadership attributes, characteristics, and skills of modern-day leadership, are we doing something different or wrong with the study? So I said, let's stop thinking that the story today is about men and women. Let's slice our data by generations and see if we can really get inside the heads, right, of men and women in different generations to find out what's going on. Now, when you do academic studies, you use the Strauss, and I can give you the PDF for this. You use this parameters to help you cut and slice the data. But if you just want to see what generation I am, here you are. But trust me, if you really want to be a millennial, you can be a millennial. And if you have the mindset of Gen X, you're a Gen X, right? So it's really just things that we have in common with each other, and it helps us measure. In general, when doing the study, the baby boomers were sort of like the 55 and up crowd. Our Gen X's were sort of like the late 30s and 40s crowd, and our millennials was sort of the 20s crowd, right? Just broadly speaking. Okay, so you know where you are. So here's what we did. We said, well, let's look at the study now by generations. And what we found is that our millennials, or Gen Y, and Gen X men really didn't see any differences in men and women in leadership. So they basically were pretty much gender agnostic, which is very interesting because it makes sense. A lot of people, right, under 55 come from dual working families, single parent families, professionals, right, where their grandmothers and grandfathers are working. So it makes a lot of sense that they don't enter the workforce making opinions about leaders. So that was pretty fascinating. But we said, who does see the differences? And that's where the data said, well, it's our baby boomer men. Well, that also makes sense because a lot of baby boomer men in the interview pretty much said, I grew up in a Leave It to Beaver household. And for those of you who don't know Leave It to Beaver, okay, it's an old show, right? And mom stays home and cooks and dad goes and, makes the money. That's the Leave It to Beaver, right? 2.2 kids. So I said, well, let's take a look and see what are the differences that this group might see between men and women in leadership to help us understand maybe some dynamics that may be going on in the workforce that we don't quite understand. So number one, these boomer men said, well, women, they ranked highest and higher in communication, mentoring, coaching, empathy, collaboration, and inclusiveness. However, they said men clearly are more successful in making quick decisions, having vision, and strategy. Right? This is a boomer. This is how they scored. Women, they said, are high in people skills, where men are more confident and take risks. Interesting perspective, right? So again, we have to go back now. I'm going to show you some clips, and I know a lot of you have not seen these. Tell you to control. HR would be all over your back, right? So we have to just put the context of the Leave It to Beaver. A lot of people came out of the military, very command control, bringing this leadership style into the workforce, right? From a generation point of view, it's a difference. Okay. But you would say that today, really the command control style of business, the hierarchical style of business, is really passé. And many of us will look and say, business today is all about people, right? You're dealing with people all the time, whether it's vendors, customers, or each other. And what we do find, right, remember how we scored women highest in people? Women excel in the people business. Okay. So leadership today has shifted from that past. Relationships are very important. Teams, collaboration, empowerment, and creating trust. However, I will point out to you that many of the men and women who I interviewed did agree with one finding with the boomer men. They said that risk-taking is something that separated them from their peers. Calculated risk-taking is admired today in firms, and if that's one lesson that we can have from our boomer findings, that was one to really grab onto. Also, when you think about leadership, a lot of our interviewees said, remember, entitlement is out. If you've been in a company a long time, which is very traditional as firms were, people would just say, it's my turn. I'm supposed to be a leader now. And they said that whole thinking is sort of out. Sponsorship is in, right? Having people see you doing great things and sponsoring you at whatever age you are through the ranks. Expanding skills constantly on your own, and seeking opportunities for visibility so you can get that sponsorship. Okay. The other thing is we found is that multi-generational workforce. If you think about it, you're living to 115. The research says today that actually people born today will live to 115, and your babies will live to 150. It's mind-boggling. And I went out over these leaders and said to them, what do you think about if I said to you, you're living to 100 or 115? And a lot of them said, you know, Tracy, if I'm going to live to 115, I have to afford to live to 115. And if I have to afford to live to 115, that means I might have to work until I'm 80 or 90. And if I have to work until I'm 80 or 90, I have to stay healthy enough, educated enough, and technical enough to be able to do that. So as an individual, we're already seeing that we're probably going to have a very long work span of 80, right, 50, 60, 70 years. But as leaders, here's what you're going to see in the workforce. Today, maybe there's 3 generations in the workforce. Nah. There's 4 generations in the workforce. No. McDonald's and Walmart tell me there's 5 generations in the workforce. The youngest employee at McDonald's is 14 and a half on a part-time permit, and the oldest employee at Walmart is 103. He's a gardener. Really amazing. But why do you want to know this? Because when you have multi-generational workforce, everybody has a different idea about work. Everybody has a different idea about leadership, right? Everybody has a different idea about how to get things done or work-life balance. But you know what I always hear about? Everybody has a different idea about technology. Some people just love technology and want to know, why isn't everything on an app, right? And other generations say, well, you know, we've been very profitable and successful without technology to date. So why would we bother? And then there's some generations like me, they didn't grow up with technology, but we sort of immigrated into it, and we see the efficiencies behind it. So it reminds me, I like to go out on YouTube and look for different video clips. I saw this right in technology. It might be you, it might be somebody you know. The other is we did ask each generation, at what age will you be a leader? And our baby boomers and Generation X said, in my 40s. But our millennial Generation Y said, in my 20s, right? And of course, why not? You're growing up in an environment now where you're seeing Mark Zuckerberg, you're seeing the Uber, right? You're seeing Marissa Mayer, you're seeing all of these very young people become CEOs in their 20s. But a lot of the other generations didn't see that. They didn't see people going into leadership until their 40s or 50s or even 60s. So I actually met a woman, interviewed her. She was 29 years old, and she was the SVP of a medium to large firm, private company. And I said to her, tell me about this thing that you're 29 years old, you're SVP, very accomplished. Clearly, you're one of these people who wanted to be a leader in your 20s. What's your story? What's going on? And she said, I'll tell you my story. She said, my parents went to college. They got out of college. They're baby boomers on the late end, and there was a job waiting for them. The company took over their training. They stayed there for life. They got promoted in sequence. They retired, and they got taken care of. She goes, I went to college. I graduated, and there were no jobs. Zippo. So I was graduating a survivor. And she said, when you're a survivor, the first thing you focus on is getting out there and finding a job, and then being really good at it so that you keep the job and then you want to excel. So she said, here I am. I got my job, got into a company, and I was pounding, doing everything, leaning in and doing all those things that they told us to do for high visibility projects. She goes, and then I started to notice that I wasn't getting promoted. And she said it was kind of weird, like all these older people were getting promoted, but I wasn't getting promoted. So she went to her manager and said, how come, I'm doing all this stuff. Here are my metrics. Why am I not getting promoted? And they said, oh, dear, you just have to wait your time. You're just not seasoned enough or experienced enough. And I said, oh, what did you do? She said, I started to call recruiters, and I quietly started to look, because I need to be valued, and there may be some unconscious bias. So I said, what happened? She said, I was recruited away. Don't ever quit your job. And she said, I went to another company. And she said, and then I did it again. And she thought, I thought this was the greatest company on the planet. And I worked really hard, and I leaned in, and I did all this stuff, and I wasn't getting promoted. And I saw all these guys getting promoted. And I said, what did you do? She said, I started to look again. She said, I called the recruiters and said, I can't work for a company that doesn't value me and my gender. So I'm going to look more carefully to find something. She said, and then I found the company. And then I excelled. Now, she said, let me give you two pieces of advice. One is an employee, don't sit. Take control of your career. Make plans, ask questions, right? Make decisions, move groups. But as a leader, be aware that you might have unconscious bias, right? Don't bring that into the workforce. Treat everyone, right? Because a diverse group is a very powerful group. And I think her point is very well taken for leaders today, because it is so easy for us to want to just work with people who are just like us. So very good story about leadership. The other thing we found is a younger generation viewed life as much more integrated. So let me just go back to 30 Rock. So now we have Liz Lemon, who's getting mentored by Jack Donahue. Now she's going to mentor, because she's Gen X, and she's going to mentor Cherie. And Cherie is sitting down with her as a manager saying, I have a really long life, so I want to have babies right away, because you have such a short time to have a baby and be a really hot mom. And Liz is saying, oh my God, because her generation is, you work first, get your career set, and then you have babies, right? Difference of opinion in generations. Let's take a look at the conversation between Liz and Cherie.
It's just, you're so young, Cherie. There's no big hurry to have babies. I mean, there are other things in life, like having a career and working and having a job and working.
You can have a career at any time. but you only have a really short period where you can be a young, hot mom. If you wait too long, you could be like 50 at your kid's graduation.
50's not that old, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you 50 now?
Perhaps she is, perhaps not. The other finding that we had is each generation has different ways of solving problems. And one of the clips that I found, which you might remember, is a Pepsi commercial, just to illustrate the point of out-of-the-box thinking. In this little snippet, if you think about a job interview, people go in and traditionally you sit, right, you line up, you have your resume, you get interviewed, and your whole job is to prove that you're better than him for the job. And if you can prove that you're better than her and you're better than him, then you're the one that gets the job. Well, now let's look at some out-of-the-box thinking. Here's a guy who says, why don't I just eliminate the competition before I even get into the interview, because then they have to pick me. So he collaborates with his friends to do a fake sort of fight, one of his friends with the interviewer, so it scares everybody out of the room so he gets the job. Very clever out-of-the-box thinking. Let's take a look. Some people come in with very out-of-the-box thinking. Mentors. We talked about mentorships. Across the board, men and women of all ages said that really in leadership roles, having a mentor is a really good idea. In fact, 94% of our findings indicated that mentorship was important. But what we did learn is that mentorship has changed somewhat. So let me just bop back to Liz Lemon and Jack Donahue talking about mentorship. In this clip, you're going to see that Jack really wants to be Liz's mentor. He not only asked her once, but twice. He really wants to be her Jack Welch and lead her through the organization. But both times, Liz says, nah, I don't want you as my mentor. Adman, well, what is mentorship about today? And they said, actually, the world is too complex. The problems are too difficult to solve and have one person. In fact, one person may not stay in a company long enough, so you certainly don't want to have one person only as your mentor. What you really want to think about is having your own personal board of advisors. And I would say to you, have go-to people. People that you go to when you want to learn about finance. People that you go to when you want something inside the company. Things, someone that you go to when you want to learn about sales or opportunities outside the company. People above you, people below you, people to the right, people to the left. Right? So think about having your own personal board of advisors or go-to people that you can tap into when you need things done or when you want to learn about something. Negotiating. We have very interesting conflictive findings on negotiating. In our survey, actually men and women pretty much ranked guys as stronger negotiators. But in our qualitative study, interesting enough, over 85% of interviewed said, no, women are really strong negotiators in business. In fact, many would say you actually want to have women on your business negotiation team because they prepare, because they listen, because they collaborate, because they solve problems, because they see the big picture and win-win. So you definitely want to have women on your team in business negotiations. So then I said, I wonder why I had conflicting results. It was the only one in the two studies that didn't come out the same. And I had a feeling it was the word negotiating. It brings up certain thoughts of people. What do you see when I say to you the word negotiating? So I went back and asked them, when I say the word negotiating to you as a female, what do you think? Well, they said aggressive. I think of negotiating that word as win-lose, as almost hostile. I mean, hostile? You mean something like this? No. So actually, it isn't hostile anymore. In fact, negotiating has changed. It's changed from the win-lose to the win-win, right? It's changed from the individual using tactics and all or nothing, lying and cheating, to people who are on teams and problem solving because the stakes are much higher. We're talking about patents. You're talking about large sums of money. You're talking about inventions. So the whole shift of negotiating has switched. The issue is that what we've learned is that although women excel in large, complex negotiations, we did find a lot of executives said that women are very uncomfortable about negotiating for themselves, particularly when it comes to salary and promotions. Now, I think that's also consistent not just with women, but a lot of people are very uncomfortable with the whole idea of performance reviews, asking for raises, right, asking for promotions. So here are some tips for you if you or one of your colleagues is in that position, is remember, a performance review is a celebration. It's a celebration about you, right? It's something that should be a dialogue with you and your manager, right? Something where you prepare for it. I would tell my teams, every day when you go to work, do me a favor and write down one quantifiable metric about a success that you had today. Did you increase sales? Did you decrease costs? Did you bring in a new customer? Did you improve a process? Write down that one metric, quantify it for me, and at the end of the year, if that's your performance review, you will hand me 365 quantifiable metrics that I can add up and bring in and say, that's really easy to get you a raise. That's really easy to get you a promotion, right? So think about in terms of what quantifiable, right, benefits are you bringing to the organization, because then your manager can bring it through for you. Also, let people know your goals. I had no idea. One of the books I have is actually created by my team. And a team of 65 people in a research institute, I found out that 15 wanted to write a book. And it was a bucket list. And I finally said, why didn't you tell me? Because I can make it happen. And we made it happen. And it's one of the best books that we've had, right? And because they tell me your goals. So if you have things that you're incubating that you want to tell someone, get it out on the table. Because then you're on radar. And then people make things happen for you. Maybe it's an overseas assignment. Maybe it's a rotation. Maybe it's something else. Or you as leaders, have dialogues with your team and ask them, is there something that you really have in a goal? Because then you'll lock into my brain and then maybe I can help you get there. So ask for feedback and insight as well. In terms of negotiating your salary or promotion or whatever it is, you absolutely should know your worth. And in today's internet society, we all should know our worth. You know, you can go to Glassdoor.com, Salary.com, you can go to recruiters, salary surveys, HR, go to your manager, go to competitors. You can find out down to the zip code what your salary can be, right down to skills and experience. So if you're thinking about asking for a raise, understand where the baseline is, right, where you are in your career curve. Also understand how the company, how they process, right? Is if it's a good year, a good quarter, might be a good time to have that dialogue. If it's a bad quarter, probably not a good time to have that kind of dialogue. I had a young man come to me. He told me, Tracy, my company's going to fire me. I said, why are your company going to fire you? You're a top performer. He said, I got a 2% raise. I said, you got a 2% raise compared to what? I said, go back to your company and ask them, what was the range of raises this year? And the company said, we had a really bad year. Only people who performed got 2%. Everybody else got nothing. So he came back to me. I said, now how are you feeling about that job? You feel like you're getting fired? He's like, no, I had no idea. I had no idea that all of this calculations go on and that companies have highs and lows. So think about that. And also different kinds of promotions. A lot of times a promotion could be to the right, could be to the left, could be on a diagonal, it could be to a new group. This is all promotion, right? It's not just this all the time anymore, because you're much more hireable, right, for leadership opportunities in the firm, right, if you have more skill building. So look at all the opportunities and start to learn about different positions that you can move into. What makes a person stand out as a leader? I went back and asked all the executives, to help me bubble up a couple of pieces of wisdom for aspiring leaders. They gave me a long list, but I'm only just going to give you a couple to think about as you move into leadership and groom your teams into leadership. Number one, be an entrepreneurial employee. Very different than in the past of waiting for people to tell you what to do. Like our millennials' parents, where the company told them exactly what to do, you now have to bring forward entrepreneurial ideas. particularly out in this part of the world, right, where we're all about startups, creating new businesses, innovating every day. So think about some of those things that you can bring to expand the business you're in. Number 2 is longevity does not need promotion. It's all about contribution. There was a story about this custodian at Disneyland, and she stood out because in addition to being custodian, she had a talent. She would make Disney characters with her mop on the sidewalks. And she added to the customer value because crowds came to see the custodian who could draw the Disney characters with the mop. Well, she got promoted, right? And now she leads a team of custodians who also design Disney characters because she brought in just value. She saw the opportunity that she could make people even happier at Disney by sharing her piece of artwork, right, of her talent. So think about ways that you can add and contribute. The firm is not your family, it's your team. And I know that a lot of firms say we're your family. But what they really mean is that we're your coaches. And like a family, we coach each other. I'm not going to be your mom, and I'm not going to be your dad. And a lot of times managers get into that rut of becoming moms and dads. So rather than get into that rut, figure out how you can coach your team so that they can really grow to get to the point where you are. High performance individuals. Remember, a lot of companies used to do these spot bonuses, right, for people who could just dive and catch and save the day, save the firm's business. But today, it's really not about just being an A player. It's being that A player that can take a team of B players and help them move into being A players. So becoming a high-performance team that can really move ahead. That's what leadership is about. Not just you as the star, but for creating a team of stars. And social intelligence. There's some firms that are actually experimenting with this. If you didn't have a title as director or vice president or senior manager, would people follow you? Or are they following you because you have the title? Leadership is being able to be the one that people just want to follow because you have that sort of know-how, right, to bring people along. At the same time, if I'm on a team and you come along and I could vote you on a team or off a team, which way would it go, right? Social intelligence, are we aware of how people perceive us and how we're presenting ourselves to others? So think about that as part of your work. And also continuous self-education. There's so much out there. I'm sure Visa gives you so much materials and training opportunities. At the same time, there's so much more out there, tutorials on YouTube, classes that you can take, probably tuition reimbursement programs. But continual education is something that CEOs will tell you just have to take responsibility for. The world has gotten so complex that we actually have to continually just up our skills, whether it's financial skills, communication skills, technology skills. So think about every day, is there something that I can do to really enhance my skills? I hope some of the research will help you in your leadership roles, and you in your careers, and in your journey at Visa. Thank you so much for having me join you today.